In the 3, soon to be 4 years that GTFO has existed, there's only ever been one level that contained all of the current enemies at the time in it, and that was the original R5D1. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your viewpoint, it is not the same case with alternate R5D1. While this version does incorporate a snatcher into it, albeit one most players will never actually encounter, there are a few other enemies added to the game since then that aren't present in this mission. But don't let that fool you into thinking this level will be any easier than the original was. Hello everyone, Professor Scaly here, and welcome to the alternate R5D1 level guide. As always, we're starting off with the recommended loadout, and today that is going to consist of a bio-tracker, a seafoam launcher, and 2 burst sentries. The reason why I recommend the bio-tracker is there are a fair amount of shadow type enemies in this level. Whether you're going for a main objective only run or a secondary run, you will have to deal with them, so to make things a bit easier, we're going to bring a bio-tracker with us. As for the seafoam launcher, this is to assist us not in really dealing with the alarms in the level, but rather in dealing with the numerous amount of charger scouts, especially those of us going for a secondary run. Now, the seafoam launcher by no means is a required tool for this level. If you're going for a main objective only run, I believe you only have to deal with 2 charger scouts, in which case you could just simply shoot them or go for coordinated melee takedowns, or maybe even seafoam grenades if you happen to come across them. So you don't have to bring a seafoam launcher with you, you could instead just bring a 3rd sentry and that would be fine. If you're going for a secondary run though, I would highly recommend the seafoam launcher as there are going to be a lot more charger scouts you have to deal with, and there might also be a few other moments here and there where having the ability to seafoam an enemy or 2 in close proximity can actually save the run. As for these sentries, these are to give us extra firepower and help us out during all of the alarms in this level. There are quite a few different types of alarms we're going to have to deal with, and for most of them, there aren't going to be really any doors we can actually shut, mine, and seafoam, so we're going to rely more so on our sentries. And the reason why I recommend burst sentries is because these are great from start to finish. These alarms are going to have different setups for them. They're not all quite the same. So we're going to want to make sure that we have sentries that are really effective no matter what type of situation you put them in. And really, the only type of sentry in the game that is currently like that would be the burst sentries. Maybe at some point in the future, things like sniper sentries or shotgun sentries could be better, but at the current moment, I find that the burst sentries are the safest and best option for this stage. Dropping down into level, you'll see that your main objective is to find the reactor and make sure you shut it down fully. And that reactor is always going to be located inside zone 72, while you and your teammates start off inside zone 68. Now, inside this starting zone, there are going to be no resources for you to collect, but there will be some regular strikers and shooters, as well as some chargers for you to deal with. And at the far back northeastern corner of it, you'll be able to find the security door to zone 69. This security door, though, is going to have a class 5 mixed alarm tied to it. So once you dealt with all of the enemies throughout this zone, you can then start setting up your defenses. And as you can see with this map overlay, there's only one possible spawn location for enemies, which is all the way down south. And again, no doors we can utilize, so we're just going to simply place both of our sentries somewhere in that long corridor, either next to each other or away from each other. Either way is fine. And once the sentries are set up, we can then activate the alarm and get to work on the scans. There will be multiple full team scans throughout this alarm, so make sure everybody is staying alive. And once you finish all of them, you can then pack up your sentries, deal with any of the enemies that are still left alive, and head into the next area. Inside zone 69, there are going to be some more enemies for you to deal with, some small boys, potentially some chargers, and even some giant strikers, and there's going to be 1 charger scout patrolling about. So make your way through here, doing your best to not wake up all the enemies and having to go guns crazy, and after you clear them all out, you can go around, grab some resources, and then you'll also be able to find 3 more security doors. One to the north to zone 70, which is ultimately where we will have to go, but this door is currently unpowered, and then a security door to the west and to the east, taking you to zone 74 and zone 75. Now that unpowered door requires you to plug a power cell into the nearby generator. So what you're going to want to do is hop onto the terminal in this area and use it to figure out which one of the 2 side zones your power cell is in. Once you know where it is, you then head over to that security door. Both of these are going to be full team scans, and once you finish the scan, you can head into that area. Now, Zone 74 and 75 are fairly similar to each other. There are going to be a fair amount of enemies, both smalls and chargers, as well as even a fair amount of giant strikers, so you might want to simply sneak your way through here. Although every single enemy in the first room of the zone will have to be dealt with, otherwise they could potentially get pulled in during the upcoming alarm. But make your way through the zone, dealing with the enemies, looking around for those resources, as you're going to want to get as many of them as you can, and then of course looking for that power cell. And once you've gotten everything from inside the zone, you can then head back out into the main area, plug your power cell into the generator, and that will unlock the security door to Zone 70, which is going to have a Class 6 alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, there are a few different possible locations where enemies could spawn from. Now, of course, you don't have to worry about these enemies coming from the west and from the east, so only one of these two directions you need to keep in mind, but no matter what, they will be able to come from down south. Most of the enemies during this alarm are going to be chargers, but there will also be a fair amount of regular strikers and shooters, so it's a little bit of a mix of the two. And all you really need to do to set up is just make sure that all the doors in the western quadrant or the eastern quadrant, depending on which one you went into, are shut to delay the enemies a little bit. Then have one of your sentries facing towards the eastern or western security door and one facing down towards south. Once you got all the doors shut and you have both of your sentries positioned, you can then activate the alarm. The entirety of the bottom portion of this room is covered in dense fog, so having some fog repellers on hand will make this alarm go by quite a bit more smoothly. But all you gotta really do is just make sure you deal with the enemies before they get too close to you, as chargers in large packs can very quickly tear through your team, and focus on the scans to get them done as quickly as you can. Once you finish this alarm, you can pack up your sentries and then head into Zone 70. When it comes to Zone 70, this is all just one big room. In here, a fair amount of enemies, small boys, regular chargers, as well as some giant strikers here and there, and there's going to be a regular scout as well as a charger scout patrolling about in this room. You're definitely going to want to do your best and not just wake up everything, as the entirety of this room and two scoutways coming after you all at once can be pretty dangerous. Especially seeing that the scouts in this level, no matter what type of scout it is, not only can it potentially spawn in regular strikers and shooters when you wake them up, but they can also spawn in some chargers. But make your way through here, doing your best to clear all the enemies. Again, the bottom portion of this room will be covered in a dense layer of fog, so if you need to, use a few fog repellers. And once you clear all the enemies in this area, you'll be able to see that at the northern end of the zone, there's a security door to Zone 71. The security door, though, is locked and requires a colored keycard in order to open it up, and that keycard will always either be located inside Zone 78 or Zone 81. So once again, hop onto a nearby terminal to query that keycard to figure out where you need to go, and once you do know, you can then either head to the western side of this area or the eastern one. Now, when it comes to these side zones, there's a fair amount more you need to do. You're not just simply entering into one zone, as you'll notice that western security door takes you to 76 and the eastern one takes you to 79. Although no matter which one of the two routes you take, for the most part you're dealing with the same type of stuff, those zone layouts are just a little bit different. So starting off with Zone 76 or Zone 79, these two doors are just simply full team scans, and inside of their areas there's going to be a fair amount of regular enemies as well as some baby strikers and two regular scouts patrolling about, and once again it's just going to be one big room. So do your best to just sneak your way through here, dealing with every single one of the enemies, scouts being the higher priority, and once you clear all the enemies you can go around, grab resources, and then you'll be able to find the security doors to either Zone 77 or to Zone 80. Once again, these security doors are just simply going to be full team scans, so open them up and head inside, and in there you're going to be able to find more baby strikers, a fair amount of giant strikers, a single sleeping berther, as well as resources, and then the key cards for either Zone 78 or Zone 81. Something to take note of though is that Zone 80 will be covered in pitch black darkness, although Zone 77 will have some lighting in it. So you're going to go in and you don't have to kill every single one of the enemies in this zone. You could just simply sneak your way through, although everything in the first room does need to be cleared out, as you will be dealing with an alarm door here in just a little bit, and anything in the first room is almost guaranteed to get pulled in during that alarm. So if that berther is in the first room of Zone 77 or Zone 80, you're going to want to get rid of it. Once you've gone through the area though, you got all the resources and that color key card, you then head back out into the area and then go to the security door to Zone 78 or Zone 81, and then you just plug the key card into it and you'll see that you're going to have to deal with a Class 5 alarm, where every single one of the scans is going to be a full team scan. If you and your teammates are heading into Zone 78, your map overlay looks like this. As you can see, enemies can come from either the west or from down to the east, and really all you need to do is just make sure all those western doors I've highlighted are shut to buy you some time if enemies do spawn from over here, and then you just place one of your sentries facing towards that western security door and one facing over towards the eastern security door. If you and your teammates are heading over to the east though, and you have to make your way into Zone 81, your map overlay is going to look like this. Fairly similar though, although just a little bit reversed, enemies coming from the west or from the east, so have one of your sentries facing towards the west, and then then one facing towards the east towards that open security door, and of course make sure these two doors I've labeled are left shut just to delay the enemies a little bit. If you happen to come across an explosive trip mine or two before this point, by the way, feel free to use it on this alarm, as this is one of the few alarms in the level where you can actually make good use of explosive trip mines. But once you got everything set up, you can activate the alarm. Like I said, everything is going to be a full team scan, which is actually quite nice. It means your teammates have to stick together, and once you finish all the scans, deal with any of the enemies that are still left alive, pack up your sentries, and then you can head into Zone 78 or Zone 81. Once again, these two zones are fairly similar to each other. There will be a single sleeping tank in them. There's going to be a fair amount of regular chargers as well as a decent amount of giant chargers, more resources to collect, and there'll be that color keycard you need in order to get into Zone 71. Of these two zones though, Zone 78 will be covered in pitch black darkness, while Zone 81 will have some lighting in it. And none of the enemies in this zone need to die, not even the ones in the first room. So if you and your teammates want to, you could just simply sneak your way through, grab all the resources and that key card, and then make your way out without killing pretty much anything whatsoever. Once you have everything though, you can then head back into Zone 70, go to the northern side where you'll find that security door to Zone 71, plug the key card into it, and once you do so, you'll see that there is a Class 3 cluster sustain alarm tied to the door. As for the type of enemies, as you can see with this map overlay, you're only going to be dealing with charger type enemies during this alarm. As for setting up for it, really all you need to do is just have one of your two sentries facing down towards the south, and then your other sentry could be facing either towards the west or to the east, depending on which area you went into, because again, you're not going to have the western and the eastern quadrant open before you deal with this alarm. But once you got your sentries set up and you've healed up a little bit, you can then activate the alarm. Again, bomb portion of this room is covered in a dense layer of fog, so having some fog repellers will help out tremendously. And when it comes to dealing with the scans, I would just say keep in mind where the scan actually is and the direction enemies are coming from, because the last thing you want to do is sort of deal with the scans closer to the security door and then rush out and get the scans much further away last when the wave of enemies is currently right there in your face. Always easier to fall back away from the enemies than to try to push your way through them. Either way though, once you got everything set up and you've activated the alarm, you get to work on the scans, and assuming you're able to survive and complete every single one of them, you just deal with any enemies still left alive, pack up your sentries, and then you can head into Zone 71 itself. In here, it's a long rectangular room, no enemies in here whatsoever, although there will be resources for you and your teammates to collect, so go through here and grab every single one of them. And then at the far northern end, you'll find the security door to Zone 72. This door is going to be a full team scan, and then once you open up the door, you're going to want to fall back a bit, because inside Zone 72, there will be a tank and usually 3 sleeping giant chargers, but every single one of these enemies will automatically wake up shortly after that door opens up. Take advantage of this long corridor room to just deal with those giant chargers as they rush you down first, and then once all the giant chargers are dead, use the pillars and just sort of run around to deal with the tank more effectively without losing too much HP. Once every single one of the enemies have been taken care of though, you can then head into Zone 72. And in here, in the middle of the room, you'll be able to find the reactor terminal, and there'll also be a few resources throughout all of it, which if you're going for a main objective only run, feel free to grab these resources and use them right now. If you're going for a secondary run as well though, I would actually say leave these resources be so you can use them when you get back later, because we're not actually going to be dealing with this terminal quite yet. As also in this room, we'll be able to find our very first bulkhead key, as well as the bulkhead door control and the door to our secondary objective, and we need to deal with that first before we do the reactor shutdown. Because once we put the reactor shutdown command in, it's going to cause a permanent blackout to occur. Then we'll have to put a reactor verification command in, just like we typically would with a reactor shutdown. And once we do, a class 5 mixed alarm is going to be initiated that's going to be spawning in shadow type enemies. Now, for those of you doing a main objective only run, enemies are only going to be coming from down south, so we just simply place both of our sentries over there, and then we just work on the scans while also tagging the enemies every so often and deal with the shadows once they get to us. Then once we have finished every single one of the scans, which the very last scan will be sustained scan, so pretty easy to figure out that's the last one, we then just quickly pack up our sentries and run all the way back to the beginning of the level, as an extraction alarm is then going to be initiated that spawns in shadow strikers as well as shadow giants every so often. And then when you get back to extraction, you're just going to have to hold out for a bit, as this is a very lengthy extraction scan. Something else to mention though is on the way back, that security door to Zone 73 that I sort of skipped over earlier, that one will unlock and you'll gain access to it, but you're going to want to completely ignore it. Because in there, while there are a few resources as well as a lore log on a terminal that you could get if you're a lore enthusiast like me, opening up that security door will cause a snatcher to spawn in, and also you're backing yourself into a corner as this is a very long corridor room and the shadows are going to be spawning behind you. So if you go in here, you have to blast your way through them in order to get out of here and actually make it back to extraction. So I would say completely ignore this door and just go straight to extraction, get on it, hold out, and once you get the scan to 100%, you are done. Of course, those of you going for a secondary objective, there's still more to do. So before you do the reactor shutdown stuff, plug that bulkhead key into the door control, do the scan, and that will unlock the bulkhead door to zone 504. This door having no scan or anything tied to it, so we can head over to it, open it up, and get started on our secondary objective. Upon entering into zone 504, you'll see that your secondary objective is to find a specific terminal and put a command into it, and that terminal will always be located inside zone 507. Meanwhile, inside zone 504, you'll see that this is a respawn zone, and the type of enemies in here are going to be Shadow Strikers, Shadow Giants, as well as a single Shadow Scout patrolling about, and every single one of these enemies will respawn when you leave this area, including that Scout. There'll also be some resources in here you could grab, but I would also recommend you leave these behind just like you did with the ones inside zone 72. We're going to want to leave all of this for when we have to come back and deal with the reactor shutdown. Although if you're incredibly low on resources like ammunition or tool refill, you could maybe bring just a little bit of this with you, although I would recommend trying to leave most of it behind if you can. At the far northern end of this area, you'll be able to find a security door to zone 505, so just simply sneak your way through here, and when you get to that door, it's just going to be a full team scan, so finish the scan and head right on inside. As for zone 505, this is also going to be a respawn zone filled with nothing but shadows and shadow giants. Thankfully, no scouts inside this area, but the zone is also covered in pitch black darkness as well as a dense layer of fog, which is going to make it really difficult to see what you are doing. And while you might be tempted to use a lot of your fog repellers, I would recommend try to hold on to at least a few of them, as we're going to want these for when we make our way back. As for making your way through this zone, I typically like to just go to the left of me immediately into that second room, as the terminal will be located in there that I can use to not only ping all of the resources inside the zone as I want to collect all of them, but also the color keycard in here that I'm going to need in order to get into zone 506. So get onto that terminal, ping where everything is, maybe write it down in chat or something, and once you then know, you can go throughout the entirety of the zone, room by room, or at least the ones you have to head into, and you can either sneak past the enemies or melee kill them or shoot them if you absolutely need to, although I recommend just sneaking your way through if possible. And once you have all of it, you can make your way to the far northern end where you'll find that security door to zone 506. Once you get here, you plug that color keycard into it, and then you'll be dealing with a class 3 stealth scan. So no alarm or anything, but you will have to do a few scans in this room, which means you might need to clear out of enemies depending on exactly where they spawned and where your scans go to. Either way though, once you finish all the scans, you can then open up the security door and go into zone 506. Now, zone 506 itself, thankfully, is not another respawn zone, and it also doesn't have any shout type enemies in here. Instead though, you're going to find a single charger scout, a fair amount of giant strikers as well as potentially giant shooters, and of course some regular strikers, shooters here and there, and maybe even some regular chargers. So go throughout here, there's 3 different rooms, so just clear out the main room first, then go into one of the side rooms, clear them out, then go to the other side room and clear out all those enemies, and then you can go around, grab resources, and resupply a bit. And you'll also be able to find a total of 3 different security doors in this zone, although the only one we have access to is the far western one, which takes us to zone 508. The security door, though, is going to have a class 6 sustained alarm tied to it. And as you can see with this map overlay, there are 2 different locations enemies could spawn from. As for that eastern room, I would just say shut both of those doors to delay the enemies a little bit. And with the 3 doors that lead into your room, leave these 2 shut, but leave the northern one open, as we want to not only funnel enemies in through here, where we're going to have both of our sentries positioned, but we also want to preserve this door for the upcoming alarm, as we're going to have to deal with a surge one here in just a little bit. Now, as for zone 508 itself, this zone is covered in pitch black darkness, and in here there are going to be chargers, giant chargers, there's going to be a sleeping tank, and 4 total charger scouts, which can be pretty nasty, especially if you wake up multiple scouts at the same time. So I would highly recommend take this area slow. Charger scouts are a big concern. C-foam launcher or C-foam grenades will help out tremendously. But you're going to make your way through here, not only looking for resources, but also looking for a power cell, which you need in order to get into zone 507. Once you have made your way through here, you've gotten all the resources and that power cell, you can then head back out into zone 506, go to the southwestern corner of it where you'll find the generator, plug a power cell into it, and that will unlock the northern security door to zone 507. However, this security door is going to have a class 1 sustained surge alarm tied to it. Now, as you can see with this map overlay, enemies can spawn from the west or from down south. Something to take note of though is that when it comes to those southern areas, because that first respawn room is only one room away from us, we have to clear out that first room to ensure that none of those enemies get pulled in during this alarm. As for the doors, all the ones down south, you could just simply shut them, don't really need to do anything else to them, but the 3 western doors from earlier, you're going to want to have these 2 shut, but this southern one you want to leave open to ensure all the enemies will funnel out through there. And this will make dealing with the surge alarm a whole lot easier, because we can then just place both of our sentries up above on the catwalk area, sort of like you can see in the background footage, because all the enemies from the west as well as the south with this funnel strategy will go through there, and this will make things a whole lot easier to deal with. Typically our sustain scan appears where you can see my teammates are, which means that little staircase in front of us is where pretty much all the enemies will be coming down from, so we just have to focus fire there. Something I do want to mention though about this alarm is there's a very small chance that enemies will actually try to take that big door to the right of you and they will ignore the funnel completely. This is very rare though. I've only seen this happen once, and if this does occur, it's usually only 1 or 2 enemies who are trying to take it, so you can either just have the C-foam launcher person C-foam the door from a distance, or you could also try to shoot through the cracks of the door and get rid of the enemies who are on it to just make sure that the door does not break down. Because if that door does break, this funnel does not work and the surge alarm is going to be a whole lot more difficult to deal with. But assuming you are able to survive and you get the scan to 100%, you just have to pack up your sentries and deal with any of the enemies who are still left alive. Probably deal with the enemies first before you grab the sentries though. And once everything is dead, you can then start setting up. Because once you open up that security door to zone 507, the Queen Birther and small amount of baby strikers who are sleeping inside there are going to automatically wake up. And while the babies themselves aren't that big of an issue, that Queen Birther is a bit of a different story. Now, if you happen to come across a seafoam trip mine or 2, this is going to be ridiculously easy. Or it could potentially be ridiculously easy. Because all you really need to do is just place a seafoam trip mine, sort of like you see with this image, to ensure that the babies don't trip it, but the Queen Birther does, as she's usually the last thing to rush out the door. And then once she's getting close to it and she does rush out, you rush her, try to kill her, and if you have a second seafoam trip mine, whoever is holding onto it could just simply place it underneath her if she breaks out of the first seafoam trip mine before you kill her. If you don't find any seafoam trip mines whatsoever though, you have to do this the old-fashioned way, which really doesn't change up too much. Again, you just sort of let the babies come out first, deal with them, and then when she rushes out, anybody with large magazine weapons like machine guns or whatnot can focus on the babies while the other people can start shooting her tumors and trying to damage her. And then once she runs off, just make sure you kill all the baby strikers, then rush her down and kill her before she gets the chance to birth once more. Once she is dead, you and your teammates are basically in the clear, and you could just head into zone 507. In here, there'll be a few resources to collect, a fair amount of seafoam products, which if you're not already holding on to anything, highly recommend you grab these, although you're still going to want a few fog repellers. There'll be some disinfectant packs, which you're going to want to hold on to, and there will also be the terminal you need for your command. Now, once you put that command into the terminal, a full team scan is going to appear. And once you finish that full team scan, your secondary objective will be completed, that eastern security door from earlier to zone 509 will be unlocked, and the fog in the level is going to turn infectious and slowly start rising up a little bit, which is going to be a little bit annoying. We don't want to max cap on infection, so what we want to do immediately upon finishing that full team scan on that terminal is rushing back out to the main room, going to the eastern side to the security door to 509, which unlocked, throw a fog repellent at the base of it while you're doing the full team scan, and then we're going to head in there. Because inside of zone 509, there are going to be shadows, shadow strikers, some spitters here and there, some resources, as well as more disinfectant packs to collect, but more importantly, there will be a fog turbine somewhere in this zone. And thankfully, the terminal is to the right of you immediately upon entering into here. So I would just say pull the first room, blast your way through it, get on the terminal and ping it using fog repellers to make sure not too many people gain infection. And then you can either all 4 go for the fog turbine as a team once you know where it is, or one person on the team could just simply face tank all the infection, or just simply use fog repellers and go for the fog turbine, grab it, and bring it back to their teammates who are just sort of staying outside at higher elevation to make sure they don't gain infection. But once you did get that fog turbine, you can then go back into 509 as a team, look around and grab those med packs and heal up a bit. And once you collected all the resources from in here, you are then going to start backtracking your way back into the main objective sector, because your secondary is finished, nothing left to do. But we do have to make our way back through those shadow respawn zones, and this time the fog is infectious, which means we need to be even more cautious, because if we do wake stuff up and we have to start shooting a bit, well, if you watch my main R5D1 run, you know how awkward of a situation that can put you into. But you're going to do your best to just sneak your way through the shadow respawn zone. You don't have to kill any of the enemies in that first one, specifically zone 505. And then once you get into zone 504, you're going to want to kill everything in here. Once everything inside of the shadow respawn zone has been dealt with, you can then go around, grab resources, and resupply as best as you can. And you can also head back into zone 72 and grab those resources you left behind and resupply more. Then once you've done that, you just simply have to ready yourself for the reactor shutdown, because of course you have to deal with that class 5 mixed alarm, which is now a little bit more annoying because you also have to worry about infectious fog, as well as a new spawn location, as enemies can come from the north of you and the south of you. So what I typically like to do is I'll have one sentry facing up towards the north, towards that open bulkhead door, one facing down towards the south with that open security door, and then if I have any C-foam grenades or trip mines left over, I will just throw them everywhere. Either I'll throw them near the entrance down south, or I'll throw them all around the bulkhead door itself to just sort of stall enemies as they get close to it. An important thing to do, make sure while you're setting all this up, is that you're either in that respawn zone or in the reactor room at all times. Don't go out into that southern corridor room, because if you do, the shadows will respawn and you have to go back up and deal with them once again. But once you've taken care of all that, C-foam grenades and trip mines are placed down, your sentries are good, you've healed up a bit, and you've also grabbed a few stacks of fog repellers that you could throw throughout this room while you work on the scan so you don't have to carry the fog turbine. You can then put the command into the terminal, take care of that, and then just get to work on the scans. Then once every single one of them is finished, so that final sustained scan is completed, you are going to quickly pack up your sentries if you can, or if you're not able to get the northern one, just get the southern one, and run back to the beginning. Screw the fog turbine, don't worry about infection. Either at this point, everybody's holding on to either disinfectant packs or med packs, in which case you just overheal yourself to ensure you don't die to the shadows on the way out, especially those shadow giants, and you're just going to blitz all the way back down south just like you would for a main objective only run. Then when you get back to extraction, plop down your sentries, throw some fog repellers, disinfect, heal up if you still have any packs left over, and assuming you are able to get that scan all the way to 100, you are done and you have completed alternate R5D1. And that's all there is to it. Alternate R5D1 sadly can't claim to contain every current enemy like its predecessor did, but it's still just as difficult and, to many, just as annoying as the original. Now, I personally don't find this level to be all that annoying to play, but I do recognize that due to the design of the level itself, this is one that I always need to bring my A game to whenever I drop down into it. Because if I don't, well, there's a pretty good chance my face will come into contact with a cold, damp floor more times than I'll be able to even count. As always though, thank you for watching this video all the way to the very end. I do hope that it was able to provide you with some assistance in beating this level. If you have any tips for this level or tricks that you would like to share, or any questions for me, or you just have something in general that you would like to say, please do let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me, and if you want to join my lovely community, there's a link to my Discord down in the description, as well as some other links you might be interested in. Among those links being one to the official GTFO merch store, which, as always, I highly recommend you check out if you're a fellow GTFO enthusiast and you're looking to pick up some sweet merch. Until next time, we're entering into the season of Halloween, so the horrors in the complex might not be the only spooks you'll be experiencing, and hopefully, I'll see all you wonderful people in the next video.